Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back to another gripping instalment of Rees Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're doing very well out there indeed on this cold and wet, wintry evening or morning, or I guess whatever time of day you're listening to this. Here in the UK, we are in the midst of Storm Claudia here in the Midlands, and thankfully I am heading down south to London later on this afternoon. In fact, pretty much as soon as I finish getting this thing cobbled together and uploaded, heading down to the O2 to see my favourite band from when I was 15, The Offspring. As it happens, with my best friend, who I've known since I was 10 years old. So that will be really cool indeed. And just in another piece of personal news, I guess, just before we jump into the first story for this week. Of course, I ran an experiment last week here on Rees Rambles. I did a collaboration, this new YouTube collaboration feature. I collaborated with my own channel. And quite a controversial feature, it seems. A lot of people who like to keep their subscriptions feed pure and clean and, don't like to see other channels that they haven't chosen to subscribe to pop up in that feed. So apologies to the one or two people who were offended by my experiment, who want to see my face, but only in one very specific form. But for everyone else, welcome to Rees Rambles. And indeed, let's have a look at the results of this experiment. Last week's Ramble got about 10,000 views, which is crazy. 178 new subscribers. Of course, I'm not quite sure how many of you will be joining me again this week, but welcome. And I'm glad, I'm glad a lot of you appreciated it and were, had that introduction to this other thing that I do with my time here in the studio. So hopefully, this will continue. But anyway, the first story for this week that I want to talk about is, of course, Valve's new hardware, which they have announced for 2026. Valve, of course, a long and esteemed history in the world of PC gaming. We had Half-Life all the way back in, 98, 99, whenever it was, Half-Life 2. Steam, their games distribution platform, which for somehow has managed to survive for, about 25 years now, and still maintain its excellent reputation, which is pretty much unheard of in the world of kind of online services and stuff. So I think that is definitely something worth shouting about. Of course, you're probably all familiar with this already. I am a huge fan. As you probably know, I am running Bazite on my home gaming PC, and I've basically turned it into a full-time Steam machine, essentially. But if you want to go and buy something off the shelf that runs the Steam operating system and their wonderful interface, their wonderful storefront, of course we have the Steam Deck, their handheld gaming console based on PC hardware running that Linux-based operating system. And now there is a home option, a TV option. Now this is something that they did explore quite a few years back. They did introduce this Steam Machines initiative where they were going to partner with various different hardware manufacturers who were going to make their own Steam machines. And the whole thing just kind of fizzled out at the time, really, which was kind of unfortunate. I don't think the operating system and stuff and the kind of the environment and the ecosystem were quite ready for that at the time. Linux-based gaming, of course, being a bit of a joke, I think it's fair to say, but all the work that Valve has done in the meantime on Proton, their compatibility layer, and now we're seeing, people running SteamOS and its various derivatives. Like I say, I use Bazite. And the games are actually running better than they are under Windows. Windows games are running better under Linux than they are under Windows on the exact same hardware with this compatibility layer. And that's pretty much what makes the entire Steam Deck possible. So it seems like it was only a matter of time before they would come up with a console version of this, a TV-based console version of this. And here it is. So, without further ado, this is, of course, Valve's official storefront that we're looking at here. Their store.steampowered.com, their hardware section, coming in 2026. Of course, we've had this on a loop. And we basically have 3 new pieces of hardware, 3 new items of hardware. So we have a new Steam controller. Now, I will say I do own the original Steam controller, and I used it for, or at least attempted to use it for maybe a couple of weeks, and I gave up on it. I just didn't get on with it at all. Not a fan of the Steam controller. I went back to my Xbox 360 wireless controller for a bit, and then I moved on to the 8-Bit Do Ultimate, which is what I use for stuff like playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on my gaming PC. But now there is a new Steam controller, and it has some quite interesting features. It has 2 large touchpads on it for a start. So for mouse-based games, they are really trying to target that audience on the in the living room. Of course, you can use those as per the touchpad on your laptop, for example. We have these new and improved sticks, these analog thumbsticks, which use this magnetic sensor technology, which apparently is some of the most advanced available. And they also have touch-sensitive tops as well, and can be used to trigger various things and extra touch sensors on the back of the controller. So pretty much your entire hand touching things, touching you, touching me. Sweet Caroline. Anyway, we also have, we'll go on to the Steam Frame next, which is their VR goggles. And these are actually a full-blown Steam Deck. So there's a full-blown PC inside these, and they do actually work independently of a PC, I am hearing. So they don't need to be tethered to a PC. Of course, you can tether them to a much more powerful PC, and they do have their own proprietary wireless technology that enables that, which is really cool. Again, of course, VR is something that I haven't managed to get into yet, I will say. Just because there's so much hardware out there, so many different options, and, I know it's starting to get easier and it's starting to get a bit more unified and a bit more kind of cohesive, but this may well be my introduction to VR, I will say, if and when I do decide to get into it. But finally, of course, I think the big headline here is the Steam machine itself, this PC. So we'll just go through the website here. We're besties. We may be new, but it's like we've known each other our whole lives. All Steam hardware works great together, whether you're streaming or playing games across devices, including Steam Deck. And because Valve remains committed to an open PC ecosystem, we also play well with others, as in your other devices. And that's the thing. If you want to use the, this new VR headset with your existing PC, you can do that. There's nothing stopping you. If you want to use your existing PC peripherals and controllers and things with the Steam machine, you can, no problem whatsoever. It all runs on an open source Linux operating system. This is very much the Valve way of going about things. They're taking on the big console manufacturers. Of course, we've got the Xbox and the PlayStation. They're taking them on in the living room, and they're doing it in a very different way indeed. And I think that is very noteworthy. So we are made for Steam and Steam OS. All of our hardware is Steam first and built to work seamlessly with Steam, as you might expect. Steam Deck, Steam Machine, and Steam Frame all run Steam OS, Valve's operating system optimized for gaming. It's designed to provide a plug-and-play user experience while still retaining access to the power and flexibility of a PC. Ahead of launch, we are expanding our Deck Verified program to include ratings for Steam Machine and Steam Frame, so customers can understand how their games will run on these new devices. And indeed, that's something that they've done, this massive kind of verification program when they launched the Steam Deck. Just going through that huge back catalogue of games on Steam, testing how well they worked with the Steam Deck, obviously introducing control, what do they call them, overlays, to kind of make the hardware work best with those games. And indeed, they are expanding that to their new hardware as well. Let's check out the Steam Machine page specifically. Of course, this will all be linked down in the description as per everything that I cover in these rambles every week. And so they're advertising that this thing is very quiet. It's very small. I mean, this thing's like Nintendo GameCube size from what I've seen. There are actually some hands-on reviews and things on YouTube, I will say, including Linus Tech Tips, who have managed to get their hands on this new hardware. So it is very much real. I wouldn't expect Steam to, wouldn't expect Valve to announce any kind of vaporware or anything like that, I guess. Not these days. Just advertising its various connectivity. Of course, it's got Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3. It has an SD card slot, which I thought was quite interesting, as per the Steam Deck, to add extra storage. But of course, you can crack it open and, of course, upgrade it, expand it internally. It is just a PC inside. And they are promising 4K and 60 FPS in most games, which is cool. We have these interchangeable front panels, which have been demoed in the demo videos, which I think are a really nice touch. We've got wood grain there, of course, as one of the official options, which I'm sure will please a certain YouTuber. And we've got this very cool Knight Rider style LED strip on the front, which can show stuff like your download progress or anything like that. It's all, of course, fully integrated with Steam, as you might expect. And you can also just use it as a PC in the desktop environment for your PC-based work and stuff. I don't know. I don't know what else I can say about this. Singing its praises from the rooftops. We'll just take a very quick look at the hardware. I appreciate I've been rambling on about this for 10 minutes now, but I am very excited about this, as you might expect. We've got this semi-custom AMD Zen 4 CPU, which is up to 4.8 gigahertz. And that's 30 watts at TDP. We have this AMD RDNA 3 28CU's GPU, which is 2.45 gigahertz max sustained clock, 110 watts TDP. I must admit, modern hardware is not my area of expertise, but that all sounds very exciting. We've got 16 gig of DDR5 RAM and 8 gig of GDDR6 VRAM. The power supply is internal, despite the fact that this thing is very, very tiny indeed. There are two models available, one with a 512 gig NVMe SSD and one with a 2 terabyte NVMe SSD. Of course, that being NVMe, I'm guessing you can just swap it out for any proprietary, the opposite of that, commodity, hardware that you might be able to get out there. 6E Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 5.3, as mentioned. The Steam controller uses its own proprietary 2.4 gigahertz interface. It supports DisplayPort, HDMI 2.0, 4K, 120 hertz, all that wonderful stuff. Gigabit Ethernet, USB 3.2. Yeah. We have SteamOS 3, which is based on Arch Linux, of course, running the KDE Plasma desktop. I don't know about installing other operating systems on this. If for some reason you might want to buy one because you like the look of the hardware, but you don't like SteamOS, is it possible to stick Windows on there? Perhaps. I think it probably will be, but I'm not sure we have any official news on that. I must admit I haven't watched a lot of the hands-on things. But there it is, new hardware from Valve. I'm very excited about this. As you can probably tell, have been a big fan of all of their stuff for many, many years now. Will I be buying one of these? I'm not quite sure. I have my gaming PC in that lovely, that Fractal North case with the lovely walnut front on it, and I am rather fond of it, I will say, and it does work rather excellently for all the stuff that I like to play. But this is mighty tempting. I like that small form factor. I will say it is a very neat little unit. And with stuff like those interchangeable front panels and that programmable LED strip, they might just tempt me, They might just tempt me. And just before we continue with the rest of the stories for this week, just wanted to give a very quick shout out to our sponsor, PCBWay.com, who have, of course, been serving this community for 11 years now with their low-cost, high-quality PCB fabrication services. However, in recent years, they have also introduced some additional complementary services, including 3D printing, CNC machining, injection molding, and sheet metal fabrication. So if any of those are a requirement for your next project, please do check out the link to PCBWay.com down in the description. And once again, thank you very much to PCBWay for sponsoring both Rees Rambles and my main channel, Control-Alt-Rees. Wonderful, wonderful people. So if you are a regular Rambler, you will no doubt be aware that I have a Discord server. Of course, Discord being the chat platform of choice at the moment, where everyone can set up their own little community and like-minded people can congregate and talk about their common interests, which in the case of my server is stuff like pets and gardening and sport and occasionally electronics and software projects and that kind of stuff, and very, very occasionally the stuff that I feature in my videos. Now, this isn't a shout out for the Discord server specifically, but I do get a lot of the material that I cover in Rees Rambles every week from that server. Of course, I like to talk about the stuff that people are discussing over there that my community are interested in, so it all works out very, very well. Now, this week I had someone pop into the server and give me a bit of an update on a story that I covered previously, a project that I covered previously that I was quite excited about, and it's so cool to see how far this has come along. So I wanted to share this with you as well. This is Nicholas Gaspar, who is involved in this project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to the YouTube video because there's like 25 minutes worth of footage of this in action. Of course, I'm not going to show you the entire video, but if you are watching this on YouTube, I think it's quite important that you see this because what they've achieved here is absolutely brilliant. Now, this is a port of Street Fighter 2 to the Atari 8-bit platform. So yeah, the Atari 400 and 800 computers launched all the way back in 1979. Continued in production until, I think, 92-ish, something like that. We had the XL and the XE computers. And I think, a very, very underrated platform. I mean, I know as an Atari fan, I will say that, but as far as their kind of graphics and sound capabilities are concerned, people rave about the Commodore 64 and stuff like that. And hey, fantastic computer, do not get me wrong, but I will always fight for the Atari 8-bits corner. And this project really does show off, what the hardware is capable of. So we've got this attract mode here, just looping through all of the various characters. Of course, this wonderful, wonderful full screen artwork that they've done. I have seen a few people on the Atari Age forums, and we'll take a look at that thread in a second, comparing this almost to Atari ST level graphics. I know that's not a very high bar, and I say that as an Atari ST fan, please don't get me wrong. But once we get into the actual gameplay, it is a bit more of your kind of typical Atari 8-bit style gameplay, but it is very much at the higher end of that. I think if this had been released back in the day as an official release, it would probably be remembered as one of the best games on the platform. It's certainly one of the most technically competent games on the platform. I mean, this looks absolutely fantastic for this hardware. My hat is off to the developers of this, and of course all of the people over on Atari Age who have been involved in this. This is a project that started back in April, I believe. And you can head over to the thread. We'll take a look at the quick look at the thread. Started by Vega123 back in April, April the 18th of this year. And this was new conversion for Atari XE/XL. It's still the early version, so it's far from finished, but I wanted to let you know that something like this is being created. The game will be on a cartridge, so it will work on a normal Atari XE/XL with 64 kilobytes of memory. I believe the original 400 and 800, did they have 48k of memory? So I guess although of course you can upgrade those quite easily. So, of course the very early, screenshots and things are looking very promising. That's not Street Fighter 2, that's International Karate. When I looked at this back in April, it was already looking very impressive. And as we've seen from that video, it's looking even better now. Now, there is a team of people who are testing this over there. And they are, of course, testing this on original hardware and making their own cartridges and things. This is very much designed to be run from an actual physical hardware cartridge, and will be a cartridge release as well in the very near future. In fact, Nicholas tells me that this is the final version of the game, and that they are actually now kind of going into manufacturing with the cartridges for this, which is kind of why it's popped back up on my radar. So that is very cool indeed. Now, the one thing I haven't found is any kind of official website or anything like that, any information on pricing, that kind of thing. Of course, this is a community project, and I will be keeping an eye on it. But certainly one that I would quite like to pick up and perhaps have available in my demo arsenal. It'd be quite nice to look at it on the channel as well. But just some of the stuff, and I know I feature these homebrew projects and stuff pretty much every week here on Rees Rambles, but so cool to see some of the stuff that people are doing with this old original hardware, and games that we never actually got on these platforms back in the day. And just going to show that this stuff was possible, not only possible, but it also possible to be done in an incredibly impressive way as well, by a very small team of people. I know modern tools and things do help with that, but very cool stuff indeed. Thank you to Nicholas for the update on this, and all the best, best of luck with the project. Cool to see that it has kind of finally come to fruition, and we are going to be seeing that cartridge release in the very near future. This next story comes with somewhat of a warning. A warning that it's going to make you feel old if you are anything like me. Now, we have had some quite big anniversaries in the worlds of computing and gaming this year. Windows 95 perhaps being one of the most noteworthy, but of course we've had quite a few others as well. Monkey Island, and I don't know why I've started listing them here because they're the only two that I can remember. But we have another one coming up next week. And this is a games console, but it's a games console that I would consider to be thoroughly modern indeed. A games console that has, HD graphics, that has wireless controllers, that has an Ethernet port built in, and indeed Wi-Fi built in. The launch model didn't have it built in, but it does have Wi-Fi. A thoroughly modern online service as well, with a storefront and online gaming and everything else. But this was 20 years ago. It was, of course, the Xbox 360, a console that I bought on launch, and very surprising indeed to learn that was 20 years ago next week. So I'll probably cover this in a bit more detail next week as we start to see some of the festivities and celebrations coming out of the woodwork. But there has been a bit of an early start and a bit of a look at part of the kind of launch celebration around that console for the team that were involved with it. So I thought I would share this with you. This is on tomshardware.com, although it is just referencing a tweet from Major Nelson, which, as you may well remember if you were part of the Xbox 360 community back in the day, was a huge name in the world of the Xbox 360. Of course, he's the community manager and kind of the team lead on that project, and indeed very much the face of that console, certainly in the early days. And he has re-emerged from whatever it is he's doing nowadays, something to do with Unity, I think, to share some photos of his launch team console, which he claims has never been seen before, or at least Tom's Hardware seem to think. So, first images of exclusive custom Xbox 360 launch console shared ahead of HD Gaming Pioneer's 20th anniversary. Project leader Major Nelson admits he has never powered on his Launch Team 05 console. And as we can see from some of the photos here, we have that custom faceplate. Of course, the 360 was known for its interchangeable faceplates. And the hard drive is also engraved with his name, and it seems, I think it's an anodized green finish on this, of course in the Xbox 360 green. As the Xbox 360 turns 20, the first images showing an exclusive edition of the console, which some claim kicked off the HD gaming era, have been shared on social media. Larry Herb, Xbox gamertag Major Nelson, and longtime Xbox community figurehead at Microsoft posted a quartet of photos showing his prized Launch Team 05 console. However, perhaps sacrilegiously, Herb admits this custom personalised machine has never even been powered on. We hope it doesn't have the red ring of death. I will also say, in a previous life, I had a website selling Xbox 360 red ring of death repair kits, and of course the clamps, the thermal. It was the solder, wasn't it, that used to go bad on the CPU or the GPU. It was a very long time ago. And you could actually kind of overheat them to kind of repair that with the old towel trick, wrap the console in a towel. And then you could kind of change the original heatsink and fan setup for something a bit more robust that involved bolts and things, if I remember. And I used to sell the kits and the guide, indeed, that included all the parts that you needed to do that. Very, very long time ago. Very long time ago now. But anyway, we'll take a look at these photos. Of course, like I say, next week there may well be a lot more news on this anniversary, but I was quite enamoured with this faceplate, I must say. We've got some lovely hand-drawn artwork on here that says Launch Team 05. We've got, I think there are some close-up photos of this. I believe is that Cortana from the Halo games, huge series, of course, on the Xbox and indeed the 360, and some hand-drawn bits and pieces, stuff like the console with the hard drive removed, and we've got, what's that, a car there, which I guess is probably Project Gotham, Forza Motorsport, something like that. Series that, of course, started on the 360. We've got a hand-drawn controller there. I really like this. I think it's quite a nice, tasteful take on the Xbox 360 theme, and indeed, as mentioned, that engraved hard drive on the top. But yeah, as interesting as it is listening to me talk about some photos that someone has posted on Twitter, the big news is the 20th anniversary. So it'll be interesting to see what comes about. Perhaps might get some announcements, maybe some remastered versions of some Xbox 360 games, or some of those kind of revisited in some way. That would be cool to see. I was very much into my 360 and into this era of gaming before I moved away from the Xbox ecosystem back to the PC. But very fond memories indeed, and I'm sure memories that a lot of you share, as it is a console that I've talked about quite a lot on Rees Rambles over the years. So watch this space, and we'll see what happens. So just for a moment, just for our next story, let's stay in that early 2000s period of Microsoft history and talk a little bit about their Windows operating system, their PC operating system of the time, which of course was XP, released in 2001, and quite famously the first version of Windows to introduce an online activation requirement called WPA, which I believe stood for Windows Product Activation, probably, something like that. It basically meant that you had to go online and activate your copy of Windows, which is, it's just a thing nowadays that everybody's kind of used to. But when it was introduced, it was very, very big news indeed. But a lot of people weren't online at the time, and of course Microsoft had to offer a telephone activation option, which involved typing some numbers in, which would then, some algorithm at their end would generate some other numbers that you would then have to type into a box in Windows and activate it. Which of course meant that very, very quickly the algorithm was reverse engineered and Windows was cracked, and I think before it was even officially released, nobody had to pay for it. But still, noteworthy that they, of course, would introduce such a requirement, and they were very, very big on piracy around that era. I do remember, particularly, even with the consoles, like I mentioned, it took a very long time for the 360 to be cracked and reverse engineered, of course, as a result of the mod chip scene around the original Xbox. So that's what makes this next story particularly noteworthy. Finally getting to the point, and this isn't current news. This is something that has been dug up from the distant past, but it is something that I do remember back in the day, and I'm not sure if I covered this on my gaming blog back in the day. I probably did. But yeah, this is a story on PCGamer.com by Wes Fenlon, and the headline here is, during Microsoft's peak anti-piracy era in the early 2000s, it awkwardly got caught shipping Windows XP with audio files made using pirated software. Of course, we always like to see the big tech giants get tripped up and get egg on their face, engaging in a bit of hypocrisy. So I thought this was quite an amusing story and a bit of a blast from the past. The giveaway was the name of the cracker, Deep Zone, buried in the metadata. Last week I shared some delightful trivia about Windows Bluetooth drivers, which really don't seem like they should be compatible with the words delightful trivia, but they are. Yeah, I haven't read that particular story, but it sounds like a rather gripping yarn. Anyway, Microsoft had to make carve-outs in its Bluetooth driver code for a specific mouse, its own wireless notebook presenter mouse 8000, released in 2006, because someone stuck a registered trademark symbol in the name and caused the driver code to break. Anyway, after I wrote that story, PC Gamer reader Bill, not Gates, emailed me with his own favourite bit of Windows lore and easily one-upped Microsoft mucking up its Bluetooth code. Windows XP and Windows 7 sounds were edited and processed using a cracked version of Sonic Foundry's SoundForge, version 4.5. You cannot make this up, he wrote. Well, maybe you could, but Bill didn't. The story actually goes back to 2004 when it was reported by German publication PC Welt. If you happen to have an old XP machine around, you can even find the files in Windows/help/tour/Windows Media Player/audio/WAV. Here's the key bit. Those backslashes look weird. I use Mac OS and like Linux pretty much exclusively nowadays, and seeing those backslashes is weird to me. Anyway, getting distracted, sorry. Here's the key bit from an archived version of the original article from PC Welt, when one of its editors looked at some of the WAV files that shipped with Windows. WAV files. I have been called out on that before. I've always called them WAV files. WAV files, indeed. When you open one of these files with the notepad, you at first only see scrambled letters. Of course, you think it's a sound file, after all, but things become interesting when you scroll down to the very bottom in Notepad. Located there is a type of watermarking which records the software that the Microsoft musician used to create the WAV files. At first, that sounds anything but spectacular. It seems as if the Microsoft musician or the freelance musician commissioned by Microsoft used the Sony-made software SoundForge, formerly Sonic, in its 4.5 version. SoundForge is a tool for professionals and enables users to create WAV, AIF, MP3, and other music files, priced at $400. On its face, all that's not unusual, but Microsoft uses professional software. Who would have thought? But wait a minute. Who or what is Deep Zone? Bingo! Deep Zone is, or at least was, a member of the Wares group Radium that had specialised in cracking music software. Along with a person using the alias Sandor, he was also co-founder of this group, which was established in 1997. Classic Wares, good stuff. In addition, it was Deep Zone who started circulating the cracked 4.5 version of SoundForge a few years ago. According to a follow-up report from Tom's Hardware, a member of Radium had actually tipped PCVelt to the story. This discovery was considered deliciously ironic at the time, since Microsoft was publicly waging battles against software piracy, and the record industry was still suing teenagers for millions for downloading MP3s. What a time to be alive. CD burners and Napster and... Take me back. Anyway, what could be a better gotcha than someone at Microsoft using a cracked version of SoundForge to create some sound effects that shipped with every single copy of Windows XP? The company denied any wrongdoing back then, insisting it had paid for its licenses and telling Beta News that a placeholder file was overwritten with original music, but mistakenly was not purged of metadata that references Deep Zone. So, yeah, fantastic story over on PCGamer.com. Bit of a revisit of a big story from the past. But yeah, Microsoft caught red-handed using pirated software to produce the official sound files used in Windows XP. And indeed, some early versions of Windows 7 as well. And of course, we have seen some other stories along these lines. Nintendo, I think, using like cracked ROMs in some of their official releases and stuff like that. And, you know, people are going to be using cracked tools. They are genuinely useful for working around some of these restrictions and some of these activation, requirements and things like that. Freelancers will be freelancers, contractors will be contractors, and a bit of a law unto themselves, he says, as a contractor. A rather amusing story from 2004, and linked down below if you want to read the rest of that and check out a bit more of the story behind it, as per everything else as covered in this ramble, as always. So, back in the modern day, but of course with a historic connection, a vintage hardware connection, this next project is something very, very impressive indeed, and something that I think a lot of us in the community have been waiting a very long time for. This is, I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, I have covered some hardware from this particular maker in the past before. This is Ian Scott, aka Polpo, and perhaps most famous for his PicoGUS device, which is an IDE card which uses a Raspberry Pi Pico to emulate all sorts of historic sound cards. So you can slap it into your authentic olden day PC, anything going back all the way to the early 80s. And it can emulate a Gravis Ultrasound, perhaps most famously, a very rare and expensive sound card, and it does that incredibly well, as you might expect. Sound blasters, ad-lib cards, and it's just a great way to experience what all of these very, very different cards had to offer back in the day, before everything was unified and boring as it is today. And I reviewed it on my channel. He sent one over for review, and I was very impressed with it indeed. And he continues to work on that and add new features and functionality, and it is still a fantastic project. So well worth checking out. But this one. He's raised the bar even further with this. It is all fully open source as well, fully open source hardware and software, I will say, which I think is very important, because this is something that previously has proven very, very difficult to crack just because of the complexity of this particular protocol. Anyway, without further ado, let's check out the official website, and that is PicoIDE.com. That's right, this is the PicoIDE. It's an IDE drive emulator based on the Pico, once more, for your old historic PCs. So anything with an IDE interface, anything going back to, say, the early 90s, perhaps a bit earlier than that. And it does hard drives and also optical drives as well. Supports all kinds of image formats. And hey, let's just take a look at the specs here, because this is impressive stuff. So, fully open source firmware and hardware. It emulates a TAPI CD-ROM and IDE fixed hard drives, so that is bin, Q image support and ISO image support for CD-ROMs, which is pretty much all your bases covered. And hard drive image support, we've got IMG, HDA, VHD and HDF, so a really nice wide range of image formats supported for hard drives as well. It's got built-in CD audio on a 3.5mm jack, and also the MPC2 header, which is the old 4-pin CD audio header, of course, so you can plug it into your classic historic sound card if you like to listen to CD audio, or I guess your PicoGUS if you want. It supports PIO modes 0 to 4 and multi-word DMA modes 0 to 2. So high-speed transfer stuff, I guess, as someone who is not intimately familiar with the IDE protocol. It has an optional enclosure, which is really nice. I love the look of this thing. It has a 1.3-inch 128 by 64 OLED screen, of course, with 4-way navigation buttons, so you can navigate through all of your image files very easily on there. It has a Wi-Fi remote control and indeed upload and management of disk images, and it has an RGB activity LED on it as well. And we can see here just a shot of the screen with this just running the IDE CD-ROM driver under DOS, just showing the PicoIDE up and running. And what's that? That's an oscilloscope. Ah, no, it's not. Sorry, it is a screenshot of... oh, this is one of the speed test utilities, isn't it? I remember this from DOS. Showing the transfer speed. I don't know why I thought that was an oscilloscope. That was very silly of me. Anyway, so we have some frequently asked questions about the project here. It can currently only emulate one drive at a time, but it is capable of supporting 2 devices simultaneously. At the moment, it's just, the priority is trying to get the hardware out of the door, and of course that will be added in a later firmware update. I have no doubt that Ian will be able to pull that off. The ability to add new features in future. The primary development and testing platform for PicoIDE is 90s era PCs, but PicoIDE has a high level of compatibility with the ATA and ATA PI standards. So there's a good chance it will work in your device. If your device is particularly finicky, that sounds like a fun development challenge. And I will say, previous like floppy drive emulation projects have found wider use outside of the world of computers and PCs, of course, like the GoTech, stuff like that, in things like music synthesizers and things, other things that used floppy disks. So perhaps we will see the PicoIDE coming to other pieces of hardware as well, not just computers. So that's quite exciting. And of course, people are asking about UDMA support. PicoIDE's hardware doesn't support UDMA, but faster systems are very well served in the area of fast hard drive replacements by compact flash, SD, and M2 to IDE adapters. And for optical, PicoIDE's MWDMA Mode 2 and PIO Mode 4 support is as fast as a 52-speed CD-ROM drive, which is plenty for fast systems. Yep, certainly in full agreement with that. Will there be a 5.25-inch or a 2.5-inch version? And it will launch with a 3.5-inch enclosure only, but depending how things go, other form factors may be made available. I guess that's just a case of designing a different enclosure. It will be launching soon. You can sign up on the website. There is no availability or pricing information announced as of yet, but there are pictures of the hardware in action. It is in people's hands and people are testing it, and hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on one and test it over on my main channel, Control.Rees, very soon indeed. I'm very excited about this. I've spoken to other people in the vintage computing community who are also very excited about this. It is a very cool project, and my hat is off to Ian once more for pulling off what has seemingly been an impossible challenge in the past. I did ask him about this. I have had a very brief chat with him about this, and he basically just said the reason he's been able to achieve this is because he's stubborn. So there you go. So yeah, PicoIDE linked in the usual places. As always, you can go and sign up on the website for information, or indeed you can follow Polpo over on the various social media platforms. From one rather interesting item of open source hardware to another next, and this one is very interesting indeed. I'm very pleased this one came up on my radar this week. This is a full-blown games console, a brand new games console. As I say, it is open source. It is very much of the 8-bit, in the 8-bit vein. And the interesting thing about this is that it doesn't use any kind of software emulation or FPGAs. It is all very much old school hardware, old school chips and logic and all of that wonderful stuff. Hardware 6502 CPUs. Yes, in this case, there is more than one CPU in this console. Let's take a look at this because this is such a cool project. So again, this is on tomshardware.com, and I will say Tom's Hardware, well done on the however many years of tech journalism it's been. I know you were one of the one of the sites I was reading regularly in the olden days, and it's nice to see you're still around and with the high quality coverage. think it's noteworthy. Anyway, the headline here from Mark Tyson, once again, it's been a very busy man this week. Clean sheet open source 8-bit gaming console surprisingly preparing for launch in 2025. The GameTank uses twin 6502 processors instead of FPGAs or microcontrollers. There's a new contender being prepared for the 8-bit console arena. But will it find anyone there? The new GameTank by PicoIDE is an open source design leveraging venerable MOS technology 6502 based processing. However, it may punch well above its weight with its clean sheet dismissal of legacy baggage, its twin CPUs and its custom frame buffer based graphics architecture. Importantly, the GameTank isn't for playing games or emulators from other 8-bit systems. It is designed to be a standalone ecosystem to inspire the next generation of 8-bit games. According to the specs shared by PicoIDE, the new GameTank is built upon just basic logic and RAM chips with no FPGAs or microcontrollers in sight. Peculiarly, for a retro console, the GameTank's motherboard features twin CPUs. The processors chosen are enhanced CMOS versions of the popular 6502, which first became available in 1975. Readers may be familiar with the 6502, as it was behind classic systems such as the Apple II, Commodore PET, Atari VCS, Nintendo Entertainment System, and more, including the BBC Micro. Just want to shout out to the Micro there. Anyway, so the GameTank, this is on crowdsupply.com. This is going to be a crowd-funded project, but as mentioned, it is open source. GameTank is a new video game console based on WDC's modern version of the venerable 6502 microprocessor. Similar in spirit to fantasy consoles like the Pico 8 or the TIC 80, the GameTank is set apart by its implementation as a physical hardware device first and an emulator second. Its custom frame buffer based graphics architecture allows it to produce smoother and more fluid animations than are typical of 8-bit hardware. Additionally, the audio system is highly configurable using a second 6502 as a dedicated sound co-processor. Wonderful stuff. System uses big chunky cartridges and outputs NTSC composite video from an RCA jack, recalling the tactile experience of early 90s games consoles. Given its unique hardware design, it is not built to play games from any other platform, but rather is an ecosystem of its own. Besides the processors, the system is built out of basic logic and RAM chips instead of an FPGA or microcontroller. In other words, this isn't just another emulator, it's an entirely new breed of hardware for the next generation of 8-bit games. And we have some demos here. So we have a direct capture of the Bad Apple demo, of course the famous Bad Apple demo, running on this hardware. We can see those lovely smooth graphics in action here. If you're not familiar with Bad Apple, of course it is quite a famous demo that has been ported to various different platforms over the years with this rather nice black and white animation with the music from... it's a PC-88 game, isn't it? One of those bullet hell shooter things, from what I remember. Quite widely known and widely covered and referenced. But yeah, anyway, you can see it running here, showing off those lovely smooth 8-bit graphics. And it does look quite impressive, I will say. Direct capture from the original hardware from that composite video output. We also have a bit of a game demo here. This is a game called Accursed Fiend, which is obviously a top-down dungeon crawler type thing, looking very nice indeed. Very, very reminiscent of, say, Gauntlet and stuff like that. Or Zelda, I guess. But yeah, again, those lovely, smooth, scrolling graphics. Nice color palette and stuff. You can tell this has been directly captured from a composite video source. I really like that. That's really kind of retro, isn't it? I do like that a lot. So yeah, this page over on Crowd Supply does go into a bit more detail about the hardware itself. We've got some lovely shots of the boards. We've got the cartridge programming tool. We've got all of the specs here. So we've got a 128 by 128 frame buffer. We've got a blitter for graphics acceleration. We've got 512K of graphics RAM, 32K of banked into 8K sections, general purpose RAM. Of course, we've got those two 6502s at 14 megahertz. My goodness. It comes with its own controllers as well, which have a D-pad, an A, B, and C, and start buttons. It's got 2 ports on the console itself. It has its own cartridge format, a 36-pin cartridge format, which contains 2 megabytes of flash memory. And indeed, the console itself also has a built-in 26-pin rear expansion port, exposing 12 bits of GPIO and other system signals. So the ability to interface it with other bits of hardware as well. Another game demo here. This is called Ganymede. This looks very cool, doesn't it? Look at this. It's like a Turrican-style platformer. Lovely, smooth, fluid animations and very cool, big, detailed sprites in this. I like this a lot. This looks very cool indeed. Do like the look of this project. And of course, again, as mentioned, this is open source. So the hardware is all open source. You've got access to the schematics, the board files, the 3D print files, and the parts lists. The SDK, the emulator, and the cartridge flash are all open source. The console board designs are maintained in surface mount and through-hole versions if you want to build one yourself, which I think they didn't need to do that, but they did. So many people nowadays assuming that people are happy with surface mount soldering, and I, for one, am very much not, because I'm terrible at soldering. I'll be the first to admit that. So you can sign up on this page, as always linked below in the description. You can sign up to be notified when the campaign launches and to receive other updates on it. Of course, this has been widely covered by Time Extension, Tom's Hardware, Retro Dodo, and we've got some information here. So this is Clyde Schaefer, who is based in New York, trading as Clydeware LLC. We make video games and video game hardware, and they do full stack consulting on hybrid software and hardware business solutions. There you go. But releasing an 8-bit console, a proper hardware 8-bit console. I think this looks really exciting. As I say, you can buy one from them. It will be crowdfunded if you want to buy the physical hardware as a complete thing. You can go and sign up on the page, or indeed, all of those schematics and things will be released as open source if you want to build your own. And speaking of cool hardware projects, just one more little thing just before we jump into our videos of the week. And this is a story over on timeextension.com. One man's lifelong dream of creating a physical WipEout racetrack is complete. Created using Carrera Hybrid. This is a story by Damien McFerrin. And yeah, so of course the iconic PlayStation futuristic space racing franchise WipEout. Quite a legendary game, I think it's fair to say. Someone has built a physical, real-life version of this. And this is such a cool project. I love when people build stuff like this. Yeah, I couldn't not talk about this. So WipEout is one of the most famous racing franchises the world of video gaming has ever produced. So it's little wonder that superfan Joseph Hallam was keen to transform it into a real-world product. For many years, I wanted to try and make WipEout slot car racing using Scalextric or Carrera sets, but could never quite get it to work, he explains. However, with the release of Carrera's hybrid racing system, let's just click on that and see what it is, Hallam's dream has finally been able to take flight. Unlike traditional Scalextric style race systems, Carrera's hybrid allows vehicles to race around the track completely freely. The AI support enables a realistic driving experience in various driving modes, explains the official site. AI, here we go. Hallam utilised the hybrid system's AI-based track guidance system and a 3D printer to replicate the world of WipEout in physical form, kit bashing the futuristic circuit from a variety of components. The end result, as you can see in the video below, is pretty impressive. So, Carrera Hybrid, the next evolution of the home racetrack. So, yeah, rather than being fixed to a track as per previous slot car racing type systems, looks like this is, kind of freely. I'm not quite sure where the AI thing comes into it, unless it's just a way of swindling some money out of investors, as it quite often is. A free app control via smartphone or tablet, free driving on and off the road, overtaking at any point, individual settings, speed, tyre, grip, braking effect, up to 30 drivers simultaneously. That's quite cool. These little racing sets, I've not come across this before. Ford Mustang, BMW, Porsche. Anyway, the one we're interested in is this DIY WipEout thing. But if you are interested in Carrera, of course, that will be linked. Anyway, so here it is in action via this YouTube video. Let's just click ahead. And this is quite the impressive setup. I mean, look at this. He's built this in his kind of carport / garage type area next to his house. And we've got the track here. We've got all of the surrounding, futuristic environment, all built in physical form. As the story says, kit bashed from bits and pieces of other models. We've got the ships, of course, the spaceships racing around the track. Of course, they don't actually hover, as per the original game, but we've got these black bases and these lovely modelled ships, kind of. I don't know what to say about this. You have to see the video. This is such a cool project by this chap, Joseph Hallam. I'd love to see stuff like this inspired by games. Of course, he obviously has kids as well, and they're also having lots of fun playing with this, but has to be seen to be believed, the sheer amount of work that has gone into this. And also introduced me to this Carrera hybrid racing system as well. So, all good. Well done. Good project. I enjoyed this one. And that, my dearest Ramblers, brings us around rather neatly, as you might suspect, to our regular Videos of the Week feature, wherein I feature videos that I have seen here on the YouTubes in the past week that have entertained, inspired, educated, enlightened, or otherwise improved my life in some small way. You wouldn't believe that I go through this same spiel every single week, would you? Because I can never get it right. Anyway, quite often they are retro and vintage computing and gaming related. Quite often they aren't. Often there's just one. Often there's more than one. And this week, I have one video for you. And I also have one Hall of Shame shout out for the very first time. That's right, I'm going to be doing something ever so slightly different this week. Not going to make it a regular thing, but I wanted to make you aware of the absolute abomination that this is. But not this first video. Let's start off on something positive. So, this is Polymat, who has collaborated using that very controversial, apparently, collaboration feature that is new to YouTube with LGR, my good friend Clint, who of course has featured on my main channel before. And this laptop you may be familiar with from LGR, of course, very, very rare machine indeed. And when it arrived, as we can see here, with Clint, it was smashed into 1,000 tiny pieces, which was no fault of the seller, of the shipper. It's just the fact that the plastic was just incredibly brittle. And of course, Clint was very sad about that at the time, as you might expect with such a rare machine. Now, Polymat, I have featured him before, and I am quite friendly with him, I will say. But the stuff that this guy is doing on YouTube, I mean, he has really raised the bar for quality in the world of retro computing and restoration type stuff, and his builds, his projects that involve 3D printing and electronics. This is absolute gold standard stuff, and I always like to bring his videos to your attention because he only makes a few per year. And what he has done, spoiler alert, is take this huge pile of shattered fragments of plastic and managed to remodel the entire thing in 3D and 3D print an entire replacement case in ABS and finish it as per the original. And, also add some quite nice little custom touches and things as well. And he's also releasing the files. So if you own one of these machines and you need a replacement case, if you are one of the 3 people out there who owns one, or indeed, I guess if you want to build one, use it as a basis for a project, that might be quite a cool thing to do. He is going to be releasing the files as well. But just the level of production in these videos and just the 3D modeling, the 3D printing, the electronics. Of course, he diagnoses and fixes an electronic issue with the board itself as well. This has got 107,000 views in less than a week. Matt, I know, is very quickly closing in on 100,000 subscribers, and it is very, very well deserved indeed because, he's a thoroughly nice chap. He's an absolute genius, and his projects are always absolutely outstanding. So I couldn't not recommend this week. It is brilliant stuff. Yeah, puts the rest of us to shame, I think. I say that tongue in cheek, of course. Every channel has something interesting to offer, but yeah, huge fan of Matt's work. So that is very cool. Now, speaking of stuff that I am not such a huge fan of course, I mentioned there was a video that I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to for being particularly awful this week. The Christmas adverts have started. If you're one of the few people left who watches broadcast TV, I very occasionally do, and of course we're starting to catch them on TV. And one of the big ones, of course, is Coca-Cola every year. People say that Christmas doesn't start until the Coca-Cola Christmas advert comes on with the the red trucks and stuff. And this year they've used AI. Now, of course, they always like to incorporate the latest cutting-edge technology as a bit of a commentary on, the values of the time and stuff. I get that, and it seems totally appropriate, of course, based on their history, that they would use that. But this is being absolutely torn apart online. All the inconsistencies, stuff like the trucks changing numbers of wheels between each shot, all sorts of dodgy stuff going on in the background that isn't quite right. Of course, that's AI-generated video. It is impressive, it does look very technically impressive for what it is and what this technology can do. And of course, it will serve as a bit of a landmark in future. We are now at the point where this stuff is starting to become indistinguishable, and I'm sure by this time next year it will be, which is quite scary in and of itself. If you've ever spent any time on Facebook, which I don't, but all the old boomers on there getting excited about stuff that didn't actually happen in the real world, because they can't seem to tell that people having 6 fingers and stuff isn't natural. But anyway, that's the new Coca-Cola advert. Absolute AI-generated slop. Don't get me wrong, I am not one of these rabidly anti-AI people. I do think that there are certainly useful, legitimate uses for it. I do acknowledge the various concerns and things around it, but sign of the times, I guess. It's terrible. Go and have a look at some of the discussion around this online, people pointing out all the various faults and things. I think it's very interesting, but also quite noteworthy as well. Anyway, that's my videos of the week, and that is indeed all I have for you for this week's Ramble. I have received a few messages over the past hour or so while I've been recording this from my friends, letting me know that we will be leaving in the very near future. So I've got to get this edited and I've got to get this uploaded. Just one more thing. Of course, I have to say thank you to my Discord community, to Manimo, Garrow, Steve's Tech Shed, Other Retro, Matt, Gravitone, Vanessa, and Technic in particular for their discussion around this week's stories, although, of course, there were others as well. Apologies if I have, neglected to give you a shout out. I am in a bit of a rush. And finally, if you haven't had enough of me this week, I am appearing on the Retro Hour podcast this week. So when the next episode drops, I will be the guest on that, offering my opinions on all sorts of things, a bit of behind-the-scenes information about my channel, about the history of my channel, my history with Atari in particular, and the story around this new studio and how this came to be, and some of the bits and pieces that I haven't kind of talked about anywhere else yet. So that should hopefully be very interesting. I am a regular listener to the Retro Hour. I'm also very good friends with of course, Dan and Ravi, who interviewed me for that, and have appeared at Ravi's Kickstarter Amiga show as well, as you probably know. So really good to have another catch up with those guys. Not the first time I have appeared on the Retro Hour podcast, but a really lovely bunch of guys and always great to chat with them. So looking forward to hearing that episode when it does drop. Please do keep an eye out for it, and another great retro podcast to add to your listening roster, if that's the kind of thing that you are looking for. That's it. I've had enough. It's Friday. I'm done for the week. So thank you ever so much for joining me. My latest review about the 2600 Pac-Man thing will be linked down below over on my main channel. Haven't released anything since that, but hopefully we'll get something out next Friday. Speaking of Friday releases, of course, Rees Rambles goes out every Friday, 2 minutes to midnight UK time, on my second YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rees Rambles, and also on all the podcast platforms. I think that's it. It's going to have to be, because I'm done. Bye.